but they, had 5 coaches and like 10 to 12 athletes, and then like the 25th anniversary team, that won the state championship back in 71, and then in what would have been 96, the 25th year. Uh, or, they have a whatever it is, 50 year and
Yeah.
25-year team. So, it was a 3-hour presentation. So we left here at 11 to get there on time and had to sit in masks in an auditorium jam packed. And it was 4 o'clock before we got out of there. So, enjoyable, but a long day on your day
Yes.
off. So, but they were very deserving, and I was glad to be there. But in terms of having some time to do other stuff or look into Tableau, that didn't happen.
All right. So, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, welcome to Dataviz class number 5. We are now over halfway done. So, it'll only take 2 more weeks before you're experts in Tableau and data visualization. So today we are going to talk a little bit more about visual communication chart types. So, if we're not talking about visual communication, just normal communication, this is a typical way to represent it of, being able to, you have an idea in your head and you're communicating it. So it takes someone to first have an idea that's worth talking about, which is in today's day and age, a rarity. So if you do have one of those, then I salute you for adding value to the conversation. But from after that, then you have to articulate it. And so there's people who are not very good at articulating their thoughts. And then there's also someone else who is hopefully a friend who is listening to what you're saying. And you hope that they're a good listener, or at least they're good at pretending at being a good listener so that you feel like you're being heard. And at a certain point, they're going to be taking the words that you're saying and hopefully have the same idea that you did. And from here to here, these different ideas could be very different, right? So in this case, it's tree, but our interpretation of tree could be very different. Obviously, a tree itself is something that is well known, but maybe you're talking to a farmer or a botanist, and they may have more detailed idea of what a tree is, and all those different factors of the person you're talking to, their experience, their age, could have an impact on how they're interpreting that message that you have. And the only frame of reference this first person has in being able to know what they're actually thinking about is their own, what they think about a tree. And so this right here, if I'm creating a visualization, I have to come up with an insight first, and then I have to have a way to deliver that message. So it could be an interactive, or it could be a static visualization, but then they have to see it. And so they're interpreting it based on the information, the context, the legends, the colors, all the design choices, the data that is being shown, and then they're coming up with an insight. And so you're either going to have like an open-ended view where you're hoping that they're going to kind of understand at least the basics of what the dashboard is, and so they'll interact with it and then they'll come up with their own insights. Or you have something very specific where you want, like, whatever your idea is, you want them to have something that's very similar. And so I think this is just a really good way to think about it, because it's very similar to like written communication too. What improves written communication? Well, it takes both the creator and the writer of those words, but it also requires the reader to have a certain amount of familiarity with text and potentially context on what is being written about. So if I'm writing like metaphysics, it's probably not a good audience for kindergarten. Similarly with like data visualization, you know, if you're working with a bunch of people who are not used to data visualization, then going with, you know, a distribution plot may not be your first choice. And so that's why it's so important to understand yourself and your audience, because you are always going to be a part of that process, and they are always going to be a part of that process. And you have, you know, biases and other things that influence your decisions that will impact the types of messages that you're sending out. And your understanding of the audience is also going to impact that as well. And so, you know, this person may not be static either. Like you could help teach them to learn because unlike, you know, the English language and speech and reading and that type of thing, visualization is not something that is a common class that's taken in high school. And so oftentimes when you're communicating, you're also the teacher as well of how you speak this language while you're also trying to share those insights. But overall, it just goes back to communication and everything that goes into that. And so it's really important to really think about that when you are designing data visualizations. And before you even have anything about the like how you are presenting information and the design decisions that you're making for someone to like get them engaged, really the most important thing is to have say something meaningful. And the best way to say something meaningful is to find something that is insightful, something that people are not necessarily familiar with or would be surprised about, and then also providing all those levels of context to where they have a good understanding of the insight that you're providing and that it's relevant to them. It is something that, you know, might stretch them a little bit, but it's not going to be something that's going to like overwhelm them as well. And so we talk about how you be able to create meaningful insights. You know, it takes a lot of different areas or I should say that there's a lot of different areas that need to go well for you to have an effective communication of insights, especially if it's about complex topics. And in every one of these areas, an improvement in any of these areas could show an improvement in the information and the insights that are being shared. And so that can include data, which be the underlying data quality. It could be the analysis and how you're looking at the data and how you're showing it. You know, are you doing things that are misleading? Are you scaling data correctly? Are you actually finding something that's interesting, or are you just looking at the very top level? Or are you really digging in and finding something that's interesting? And visual communication, which is what I was just talking about, data visualization. Are you presenting stuff that is both interesting but also intuitive? Design, and this goes into both visual design and UX design. Are you creating something that is understandable? If you have an interface, does it make sense with that data visualization? Would people be able to naturally interact with it? without a whole lot of guidance? And is the visual design, does it make sense? Do you have the right contrasts on colors to make sure that they are discernible? Is it accessible to larger groups of people? And so all those different questions, and the more you understand those different ideas, would show an improvement in how you're able to communicate with other people. And then psychology. And the importance of psychology is to understand just how people think and the common areas of bias, but also just cognitive errors, emotions, how emotions lead into decisions and how people think. I mean, groupthink is a very big thing. You may think that psychology is not really a central part of data visualization, but it is. And especially so in a business, because how many times in an organization, it could be whatever, school or a company or anything like that, that you've seen where everyone notices that there's issues, but nothing can get done. And there's just this inertia. And there's also a bit of groupthink that happens. And so understanding why that occurs and how to approach that, gets into change management. So if you have insights with data visualization, you're essentially creating or advocating for a certain type of change. And most change, and especially in larger organizations, fail because just of that inertia and complexity of systems that are in place, and like legacy companies are very large. And so it takes a lot of effort, a lot of political cost if you're trying to make that change, that oftentimes it's just the easiest path is to do nothing. And so that's why innovation is very hard for a lot of large companies. And so, like, when you're looking at Dataviz success and what makes a successful data visualization, and these are the 5 things that I just thought of that could have an impact, and there could be more. I'm not necessarily saying this is comprehensive. It's accurate, and accuracy is both data accuracy, but also just how you're visually representing that data. Just like how people talk about how statistics lie, well, data visualizations can lie as well. Is it useful? And that's where context is important. Just because you're creating charts and dashboards doesn't mean you're actually adding any value. Is it intuitive? Is it something that people will be able to understand, or is it something that's actually it's counterproductive, that it's actually making things more, like a big part of data visualization is to make things easier to understand. So if you're making things that are making it more difficult, then you're kind of not really achieving your purpose or providing value in your role. Is it relevant? And again, that takes a lot of context. Perhaps it is useful, but it may not be relevant to the question at hand. And so some of that takes focus and making sure that you're answering the right questions. And a lot of that also depends on how timely it is. And so you can come up with insights and answers, but if they are taken at a time that is too long before they can do any good, then all that work you did was not of any value. So anybody familiar with type 1 and type 2 errors? Have you heard of that? So this is something you would see in academic research and statistics. But really, I think it's important to think about type 1 and type 2 error just in everyday life, let alone statistics, data visualization. They're essentially just your inferences of what is and what is not, and if that actually reflects the reality of what is and what is not. And so from a data visualization or Tableau perspective, you can make a hypothesis, or you can confirm a hypothesis and say that, the reason we're losing money in this certain area is because of X, Y, and Z. Well, if that's not the reason why you're losing money, well, that would be a type 2 error, because you are basically saying that this is so, but it is not so. And then type 1 error is basically saying, well, that's just noise. That's not a real trend. I think we're just going to go back to the previous patterns that we've seen before. And so your rejection that there is a change of what you're seeing, and there actually is an underlying change in the data, in the numbers, then that would be a type 1 error. And so to merely make that easier is, the way to think about it is that if you're saying that insight, or you're saying that there's some kind of insight, it doesn't necessarily mean that's reality. That's just your perception of reality. And how accurate you are will depend on how many type 1 and type 2 errors you have. And so one of the things that I often talk about with clients is, and it goes back into what we're talking about with the aesthetic usability effect. Does anybody remember what that is?
Sorry, you want to remind us?
What's that?
Sorry, you want to remind us?
Okay. So aesthetic usability effect is based on, if it's designed well, people are going to have more confidence in it, which is good in a UX sense because you want to build trust so that people go through like a shopping cart experience. But in data visualization, it could be counterproductive, especially if you have more uncertainty, or if you just have a type 1 or a type 2 error, because it will increase the confidence that people have with the insights you're providing, but you are actually giving them that false confidence.
I think an example in education, at least that I've seen, is who's creating and providing the information to the designer or the data scientists, and then who will be using the information. And it appears to me in our case, and it's a large organization, that it's people down at the main offices that are creating attendance dashboards tied with grades or whatever. And then when we get it in the building to take a look at it, like, wait a minute, there's no way we've got this, and to check the accuracy of the data, because either somebody didn't fill in the forms in the first place where they gathered the data from, and then that goes back to that accuracy thing. And it's like, well, if you would have had us kind of fact check it in the first place, we know where there isn't or isn't time for teachers to enter daily attendance, or if there's subs, which we've had a lot of subs, how accurate do subs enter attendance? And so when you're pulling attendance data, and I just think in big companies, thinking through, are the right players at the table that are going to make it the most successful for the company in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and you're absolutely right. And so, like, you could think about all the time and effort it was taken into building that dashboard, but how much value is it providing if it's not correct? And what the person designing the dashboard should have done is to talk to people with the domain knowledge, and that's why domain knowledge is so important, because they're going to be able to more clearly see, when there's errors with that context that you wouldn't necessarily get unless you actually are a teacher. They'll look at it from like a higher level view and saying, okay, yeah, the numbers are populating. Yeah, the calculations are working, but they wouldn't necessarily know that these numbers wouldn't make sense based on that ground truth. And I think that's also a good point about larger companies, that a lot of them are cross-functional teams. And what we're talking about is a cross-functional problem where you need to bring in a data engineer, you need to bring in data scientists, you need to bring in business analysts. Business analysts work on the requirements. Data scientists work on the statistics and predictive. Data engineering works on moving data and making sure that it's available. And then you also got database, you got security, you got all those different people that could have an impact on the data and how it's being used within a company. And that stuff, like from that perspective, is done, I don't necessarily say well, but it's well defined. Like generally people are, it's well understood, like how to do all those different things. The part there's a bigger gap is the actual user interviews. What should we build? Because a lot of times what will happen is that you'll have the everyone just has like these big ideas about, okay, we're going to get all this data, we're going to spend all this money on the infrastructure, and we're going to have all this data available. But then when they actually get to the end of it, it's like, well, okay, what do we do with this data? We got more data than we know what to do with. The problem is not that we don't have enough data. We got too much data. We have no way to simplify it. Companies are very complex, and the data of companies is very complex. And there's no real process for most companies. I think it's slowly changing to actually get beyond IT and into that design process especially for internal use. And it's so critical because we talk about how the value of the data really depends on getting the design right based on the context of who the domain expert is, who the audience is, what their feedback is, and everything about them. And it goes through that whole process with the data visualization designer. And based on that, not only are you going to know how to design your dashboard, but you also solidify the data requirements, knowing what data is useful to them, which is important because then you can go back to the data people, either a database or a data engineer or a data scientist, depending on what your question is or what your data requirements are. You actually can give them direction because they can build anything. So like if you're thinking about the people on the back end of the process are like engineers, they just need blueprints. So if you're building a bridge, you want to be able to give them an accurate drawing of the bridge. You want to have an estimate of how long it's going to take and what materials are going to be needed and those types of things. And once all that's figured out, it's very easy for them to be able to facilitate that request. But the hard part is, what do we build? And that's what we've been learning about in this class so far.
I think another example of that kind of accuracy or how do you use it is just a simple attendance and grades. Back when we went to school, they had the red grade book with, your names on the side, and the teacher took your, attendance or whatever and gave you a grade and assignment and a general thing. But they took attendance at the beginning of the day and clipped it on the outside of the door, and somebody came around and checked who was in school or who wasn't. But when there was electronic grade books and electronic period attendance, all of a sudden now they can lay every teacher's grade book on top of it, and they can find if David missed not just first hour and eighth hour, or if he missed first and second and third. But they never hired anybody to manage, now that you know that data, because it's easily queryable and it's visual. There's still only one attendance person, and there's only one assistant principal that's tracking down kids who are skipping, but you got a whole lot more information. And I just having teachers take the time to take the attendance when then, well, what's administration doing when they're skipping? They aren't doing anything because they can't keep up with, just because more information because you had people enter it. You got to make sure you have the right processes to handle all the data that you discover when you can lay it on top of each other where you couldn't prior to the technology.
Yeah, and that's a common problem too, especially if you have manual entry of data, is people who are manually entering data don't see the value of the data from their perspective. And so, especially if you don't have like form validation, or a way to prompt users in a repeatable way, a lot of times you're going to get bad data quality. And for whatever reason, a lot of companies really don't focus on this, which boggles my mind, because once you have bad data go into the system, and it's a nightmare to be able to improve it after the fact. And there's just some simple things you can do, like if you do that process. But then also, like, people know, and this gets back into psychology where it's really important. So this is actually a good discussion point here. It's for so is anybody familiar with the book Cheaper by the Dozen? All right, so he's a time like efficiency expert in being able to go through the systems and making sure that people are helping them try to be as efficient as possible with whatever their tasks are so they can do more. And so the whole reason he had 12 kids is, or wanted 12 kids, because it was going to be more efficient and cheaper to have by the marginal cost would be cheaper. Well, efficiency experts are a really good example of kind of what data visualization people are often doing. So if you ever know the kind of the cat and mouse fight, I don't know this fight, the dance, we'll call it dance, between like, and it's, let's say that I'm working on an assembly line as a data visualization person. My job is to improve the efficiency so that there's more output. So that there's more output, there's more. And I am pitted against a union boss whose job is to keep my benchmarks as lower so that I'm not overworking the workers on the assembly line. And so if people know they're being watched and their motions are being tracked, they will adjust their behavior. And so, a lot of times you'll see that people don't want to be their best when they're being tracked. They don't want to give you an accurate number, because if they get an accurate number, well, then you could start. Now, if they can move that number lower, well, now they might be able to, take an extra break or what have you. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, they have their perspective, and and the company has their perspective, and it may very well be that the company is overworking them, and they have every right to, try and make it so that it's, so at least a good quality of life for the people that are working there. But that's just an example of how not everybody wants the same thing. Just because you're a data person, you have one perspective and you're trying to improve things. Not everybody is going to be happy with the answers that data is providing. And so another example of this is people who are successful in a company based on influence in politics. They don't really contribute anything, perhaps, but they're just really good at climbing the corporate ladder. And so the last thing they want is some objective measure that's comparing them with all their other contemporaries that is giving them a grade. So for the school example, I'm sure there's a lot of people the students that are happy that there's not enough people to be able to check all the attendance records so that they could, so that's a bit of a cat and mouse game too, where the administrators are trying to keep kids playing hooky at a minimum, while the other kids, all the kids are trying to game the system where they don't have to go to class. I've heard of stories too where people, this is from college, people were tasked to enter in a certain amount of information, which is kind of reflects of the work that they were doing. And they basically hacked the system somehow. I don't mean like, computer hacked, but they gamed the system to where that they were actually inputting information that made it seem like they were doing the work while they were actually not doing any work at all. And so then they just kind of like breezed by with that. And so that again is where data can get you, like if you trust data too much, it can get you in trouble, because data is just data. It's not necessarily a reflection of reality, and people can use that to their advantage or disadvantage, depending on how cynical and cunning they are. Yeah, or how naive they are as well. Another really good example is anybody familiar with the Wells Fargo scandal? This is one of my favorite examples. So the Wells Fargo example is a great example of data, inappropriate use of data. So they decided that they needed to create new accounts because new accounts, so new checking accounts, savings accounts would lead to more growth. And so they decided to create a KPI or a performance benchmark on the tellers to open up new accounts for people that are walking into the bank. And so then that became their part of their performance metric, how they're going to be graded against other bankers. Can somebody see what a potential problem would be for having a benchmark for a teller, wanting them to open up new checking and savings accounts?
So it depends upon if that is how significant that metric is based upon how they're paid or even their employment.
And I think
Well,
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Ronnie.
I was just going to say, as a mother of two young teenagers or two young kids who opened up their first teen checking account, I was told I had to open a second savings account for them, and I'm like, no, they have to do a savings. They already have them. But I did what they were told. I was told, well, then when they hit a certain age, then all of a sudden now there's a minimum requirement. The accounts, both the checking and the savings, have to have $300 in each. Well, that's in that fine little print or whatever. Well, then now you've got a bunch of angry customers who call center or their reputation. I mean, I kept my kid. I still have my kids as accounts because I'm waiting for the settlement or the suit. Like I know I was a part of that here in Omaha because my kids each have multiple accounts because of what they required us to set up, 15 years ago or whatever. But I refused to close it out because the settlement,
Right.
But I have to make $300. But so that $300, it's sitting in all four of those accounts now. That's $1,200 they're making interest on.
Right.
They can invest, or they, it's got angry customers for sure. But
right. So they went beyond just aggressive salesmanship or salespersonship to pushing people to the point where they did things illegal and unethical.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, think about if you're going to a car dealership. What is your goal typically if you're going to a car dealership, talking to a sales rep?
Just drive the car.
Right, just drive the car. But you have an intent to buy a car, though, right?
Yep.
The commission makes sense. Like, the difference between a good car salesman and a bad car salesman. Like one that's like, yeah. Now with a bank, what is your intention about going to the bank?
Have them hold your money.
Well, but are you necessarily getting a new checking account every single time you go to the bank?
Mm-mm.
And would you expect a teller to act as a sales rep?
Right.
Or would you expect them to just handle
what you got?
Right. And so how much power does the teller have on how many accounts they're opening up?
Right.
So it's kind of puts them in an awkward position. So what happened is that they had too aggressive a targets. That was like, so they had like a number which that was not very influenced by the tellers themselves. And then they created an unrealistic number. And so instead of pushback from the frontline employees to say, hey, this is an unrealistic number, or I'm guessing that management was just ignoring them. And this is why I think it's so important to talk to frontline employees, because management is so clueless on these things most of the time. I think that's like one of the best things that a data visualization person can do is to give voice to the frontline employees that are actually talking to customers every day, and provide that back to the executives who will oftentimes have an idea what's going on, but really the ground truth is very different to what they see. And so what was happening was they were opening up fraudulent accounts to meet these unrealistic benchmarks. And so from an executive perspective, and you have in their dashboard, hey, we're hitting our KPIs, we're hitting our numbers, we are showing this much growth, but it was all based on fraud. And that fraud happened because there was not a good understanding of incentives, and also having a very bad performance metric for this based on who the job role was, and then also based on how aggressive it was. And
David, sorry to interrupt you. Not just that they were hitting those benchmarks, but then the after effect, the intended outcome from those benchmarks started happening, where fees were being paid and fines were being levied.
oh right, yeah.
And so you can even go into the fact that is there poor system design that would cause people not to see that, or other decisions.
Right. There's no control of it at all. They didn't even expect fraud to happen. And it was just like they found out about it by clients getting like, what are these extra charges for all this different stuff? It's like, it was just like such a perfect example of what can go wrong when you are too data driven. Like just because you put a metric out there doesn't mean it's good. Just because you have you have to be especially with anything that's tied to money, like you have to be real careful about how you're applying a data metric to that, because people are either going to game it, you create bad incentives, which can come into ethics problems. I mean, think about how much money that cost Wells Fargo
Still,
after the fact.
Yeah. And then we'll have a chance to talk about payment for order flow too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So yeah. And so you have to think about, like, when you're presenting those dashboards, like, what is this data? Is this data like, how accurate is this data? And when you're talking about data accuracy, it's more than just like, oh, what's the quality of the database, but is this actually saying what everyone thinks it's saying? And some of that you can't really get around outside of actual interviews with frontline employees and observation of seeing how the data is being collected, what this data actually means. What is a good number? Why is it a good number? If there are a bunch of employees with good numbers and a bunch of employees with bad numbers, what does that look like? Is this something that, like, is there improvement? There's so many different questions to look into. And unfortunately, like, from my experience, most of the time people look at it as the most simplest way possible with the highest amount of confidence, when that is not generally the best way to approach that you want to be very critical of everything that you're looking at. You don't want to just believe it just because you see it on the screen. All right. Any other questions on that? So, source of errors. So we already talked about data quality issues. So an example of that could be, one of my favorites is a free-form fill. Let's say I'm having company name on Salesforce, and I type in Google, and then someone else types in Google, comma, Inc., and then someone else types,
Google.com.
Thank you. And then Gmail. And so then you got
ABC.
Next thing. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Next thing you know, you got like 30 different values. And so then how can you aggregate data off that? You can't. And it just becomes a mess real fast. So there's a lot of different ways you can have data quality issues. The best way to approach that is to have a very good data collection plan, especially if there's any manual. Have validation where you can, and try and get it at the source so you don't have to fix it in the downstream. Sample size. So that goes back into type 1 and type 2 error, where the smaller your sample size, or let's say that you see a pattern or a trend, maybe it only happened once or twice. That's not as useful, or you're not going to be as confident in that as compared to if it happened like 5, 6, 7 times. And just the amount of data that's being used for that insight, will have an impact, because there's randomness in everywhere in the world. And, if you just look at any type of statistics, like with the linear regression with residuals, you're going to have just what you're looking for with the residuals is, a good spread to show that there's random error for that. So when you're as a data visualization person, you don't necessarily need to know the intricacies of that, but you do want to make sure that you're just cognizant that if you're looking at a trend at a very tight level, that you're not looking at it at a forest level to where you're making, or I should say a tree level, and using that to make forest level insights if it doesn't warrant that, because you're actually like looking at it too closely to where you're making recommendations when it's just noise. It's not anything that's useful at all. Like from a statistics perspective, I would call that overfitting, to where you're trying to model too much movement when it's not warranted, and something that is a little bit more of a bigger picture view is warranted. And then bias. So who in this class has bias?
Doesn't
For
everybody?
sure. Not.
I need to make my trick questions a little bit more sneaky. So how many different types of biases are there? Can someone give me an example of a bias?
Sampling only from those that are present and assuming that that represents the population well.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, it's a problem with convenient sampling. Yeah, there you go. All right, Mara, do you want to count all the biases so you can let us know how many there are? I'm kidding. So
20.
this is that's good. So this is just an example of all the different things that could impact it. There's a really good book out that I've read, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, I think it is. I'll post the link on Slack. But it goes into basically how we kind of go through life just believing things that are not really so, which goes back into that type 2, type 1 error. Even if we're not like conducting experiments, we still have ideas, we still have beliefs, and it just depends on like what type of critical thinking, or how much you think critically, and how you kind of improve or move your opinions based on evidence and just your understanding of how you think about things. And how do you know that we know that bias exists?
Politics.
Or at least cognitive errors. Politics is a good one. I was going to say gambling. People thinking they're going to make money gambling, which is statistically not going to happen. Maybe you get lucky, maybe, but probably not. Okay. So it's Thinking Fast and Slow, and I am posting this on Slack. So check that out. Yeah, but there's a ton of different biases, and a lot of it could just be impacted based on your own experiences. Anchoring bias is another one that's actually a real big one for data. So anchoring bias is if I put out like a number for, like, let's say I have a goal or a benchmark, then that number itself is going to have more importance than it actually does, because that's just where people set their expectations. that's actually one of the biggest challenges too, is visualizing uncertainty. And so there's a fuzziness just because like so for example, like if I have a bar chart for a quarter view, is that an actual representation? Like, is that a perfect representation of what that comparison is? No, because why is it that quarter view? Like why that quarter view? Because that's just how we look at it, time, right? And so there might be a more optimal way of cutting that data. And it's, I mean, in some ways arbitrary in why we focus on first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth. There's no necessary real reason why we have 4 quarters other than the name as a way to look at data. And so it's just out of convenience that's how we kind of view data or view information on a timeline. And so whenever you have like a bar chart, so like if you look at most bar charts, they're going to have solid lines, you got a solid block, but really, if you're really thinking about it, there's a fuzziness to it to where that may not be that exact. And so that looking at it that exactly as a data visualization does, there's actually a bias that you can't really get around or away with or away from when you are presenting charts. Okay, so this is data visualization, one of the data visualizations I made with Tableau. So your test is to recreate this for the remaining of the class. So you have 2 hours. And if it's successful, then no, I'm kidding. It took me longer than 2 hours.
Slam dunk.
Yeah. Anyway, I just showed this kind of going through the examples. Can you see all the different elements I was talking about? The data, the analysis, the interactivity, the visual communication, the navigation, and then also psychology.
Are you saying looking for bias or just the elegance of it being visualized?
No, just all the different considerations. Just think about the considerations of, so potentially bias, yeah. And that's one of them, and that goes into psychology. But like from the whole lecture of data analysis, visual communication, design, and psychology, do you see all those elements and being able to look at this visualization through those different lenses? So from a data perspective, so getting a shot chart on here, one of the decisions, be able to have the data shown in this way, I had to create a grid in Excel, and then based on the XY value, basically create a bucket for each of these. And so, and that's all, like when I say bucket, that's all done on the data side. And so I created these containers, which allowed me to build a heat map and then also these histograms on the side. So from an analysis perspective, I'm supposed to be, like, the goal is to be able to talk about why Steph Curry isn't shooting any jump shots. And so through the histogram and then the heat map, you can see that it's either close to the bucket or a 3-point. And then you'll see here, I mean, this is a static image, but on the actual on Tableau Public, when you're going through the different shot types and the shot distances, you'll see that the accuracy, will improve closer up, but then the lower accuracy on the 3-point shot gets compensated because you get an extra point. And so you'll get a points per shot. And then you'll find that the points per shot here is going to be much lower compared to near the bucket or beyond the arc. which is just the data way of saying like he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. And so from there, then you could talk about the chart selections. So I used heat map and marginal histogram here on each of the sides to be able to show. So this is kind of like your summary view of just seeing it from like a heat map, but then the histograms provide an actual visual accurate way of seeing what those magnitudes are. And then from a design perspective, UX, like how interactive it is, having familiar web menus, both the vertical and the horizontal without it being too cluttered, but then visual design too, where the colors are matching. It feels like it's something that is the Sacramento team colors. And then it also worked in with the chart where that yellowish color is on the 3-point line, and the bluish part is on, within the arc. And so then that visual part of it works with the broader visual design. And so there's not a whole, as we go back to color saturation, the focus is going to be on the center area. And then you might wander around the different areas, but you could consider this up here in the top right chart junk, but it's not distracting. It's not something that's taking away from what the inside of the visualization is. And then psychology, there's probably not too much on psychology here, but this is data that's being shown in a different way. It's not a bar chart. And since this is something that's being shared like through social media and Tableau Public, novelty is a big thing. People are going to like things that are novel, especially in data visualization. And that's going to do more, or that's going to do better compared to like if you're just focusing on just creating a really solid functional data visualization with bar charts, because people have seen bar charts and people are quote unquote bored with bar charts. And so they're not going to really go out of their way to share that because they've seen a billion of those.
Well, and this is going to seem more tangible to anybody that's part of this topic.
What's that?
This is going to be more tangible to anybody who is a part of this conversation or this topic. I mean, the players have whiteboards like this. You think about it like this. So, yeah. Right.
And if you want to talk about incentives, so I was talking about novelty and kind of the psychology. Does anybody have are you on social media a lot? Anybody here?
Not so much.
TikTok.
Michael is shielded from this.
Yeah, so my wife's in education, and so I'm purposely not on social media much.
Okay. Well, is everyone familiar with dopamine in social media? There's a link between that, and where there are some people who might have social media addiction. Right. Well, it does infect data visualization too. I've done, like I've talked about before, I've done grad school research on data visualization. And one of the people I was talking to was commenting about how they have like data experts, like database experts who know everything about data. But then when it came to presenting like their insights, they had no data visualization training. And they were being compared to other people who were just like, that's all they focused on. And there was it's almost like you get competition with people when they're presenting insights or data visualization. Like people will actually see what other people are designing, and then they will pull back from sharing their insights, even if they are more valuable, because they will judge their ability to design data visualizations compared to other people within an organization. That's not what that's something you don't want. You don't want it to be competitive. But you also see it in the broader social media and data visualization where people will follow likes. They will follow what gets shared. And the problem with that is you'll get too far into novelty without actually doing anything that is adding value or finding insights. So it could possibly be the most important insight you have has an audience of like 3 people, and it's not going to generate that many likes. And so it's just a way of thinking about what is actually adding value, and are your incentives right? Are your motivations good? Because I mean, I think there's a lot of instances where it's good to share your design work and to get feedback and that type of thing. But there's also, you know, a lot of times when you're people like designers that dribble, tabloids typically on Twitter or Instagram, where you'll just see people kind of go down a path where they are only designing, and it's not necessarily as right or wrong, but people may not even be aware of it, where they could actually stunt their development into data visualization because they're more focused on trying to get that dopamine hit, trying to go viral, instead of kind of pulling back and focusing on the craft side of things. All right, I think it's time for a break. I think Maura thought it was time for a break like 30 minutes ago.
I didn't.
All right, back at 7:14. You get that extra minute.
Sounds good. See ya.
go through the chart types, I'm already amazed at how many we've created in Tableau.
Yeah, so if I create a new workbook, would it make my computer work faster?
Well, you can try that experiment.
Okay.
It could.
Yeah, it is moving slow.
I know the feeling.
Sorry, I'm late.
It's all right. It's not a race, so we're good. All right, and now into the chart types. We talked about this a little bit, and we even made a couple charts. So it should be review, right?
Yes.
All right. So density and distribution. And so a lot of these you'll find in that Financial Times graphic that I shared in a previous class. So this is just kind of a highlight of looking at the different ways that you can look at data. So these are just examples of the charts. You're not going to go through show each single one, but it's just an idea of looking at different ways of being able to look at data. And this is something that you can copy each of these different names or type it in. So if you're looking at you need to find a distribution, then you can look at the different types of charts within this group and then use that as something that is a potential chart type option for whatever you're trying to design. One of the things that Tableau is not very good at is density plots, and it's something that you would more often do in something like R, and that's what the image is here. Was really nice visual, especially if you're trying to compare the shape of two different populations, especially for a scientific data visualization. But it is something that you can do in Tableau. You just need to, or the easiest way is to kind of create a spreadsheet, have an XY, and for each of the different move or when you're going across the x-axis, you have that calculation for the curve, and you can do that in R and some other programming languages. So there are ways that you can do more custom chart types that are out of the box on Tableau once you start to understand how to do some of those XY coordinate things. And we'll talk about, we might talk about that in a later class. Correlation. So, it's pretty much scatterplot is your best bet. There's also table lens, which is basically like a bar chart, mini bar chart for each of your different variables. And then based on sorting them, so if you sort it on one variable, then if you see other bars sticking out, then you can see how well it correlates with the other variables. It's not as clean of a correlation as scatterplot, but that is something that you could use if for whatever reason scatterplot doesn't work. XY heat map, that's something that you'll often see that in more of a scientific visualization, and that'll also be something in R. that's like if you ever see those charts where they got like a ton of different variables on the x-axis, and then they also have on the or I should say on the y-axis, and then also the same exact variables on the x-axis, and then based on those combinations, it'll create like a heat map to show you what those correlations are between all the different variables. Let's see if I can get an example. Okay, so I'm going to put this in Slack. So that's an example. Oh, it's not as clear as I thought it was going to be. Okay, so there's a little bit of a clearer picture. And so you can see how they have all the variables that are on both sides.
If you're okay, I could share one too.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Did that come across okay?
Yep, that looks great. Yeah, and that's so you can see that they got the variables going across. You'll see this a lot in bioinformatics, like a lot of medical stuff. Trying to see like what all the different correlations are for a lot of different variables. Scatter plot. So back to the presentation. Well, thanks for that, Michael. That's great. So scatter plot, is very informative, and so it's not just like looking at, each of the different dots themselves, but to see what that pattern is, and so then you can start to see what that relationship is. Is it linear? Is it nonlinear? Is it random with no relationship? Is it positive? Is it negative? And it's just one of those, just if you're just trying to find a comparison between two variables, it's really difficult to do better than that. And the 2D histogram is essentially the same thing as a scatter plot, but it solves a density problem. Like if you have too many dots, and so then it turns into a bit of a heat map, where you basically create bins. And so this is kind of similar to that Steph Curry visualization I had, where you create the bins, and then based on if the circle falls in that, then it will have that frequency that creates that gradient where the more values, the stronger the color will be. So trend. Is anybody familiar with investing?
A little bit.
Do you look at stock charts? You know what a candlestick chart is?
Mostly.
Does anybody know what technical analysis is?
You mean like Head and Shoulders and Saucer and Cup and
Yeah. So what's the thinking behind technical analysis? Do you know, Michael?
patterns? So the assumption there is that something that you've seen before will happen again.
Right. And a lot of that's based on human behavior, as I understand it, and just like based on trading activity. That's at least what the claim is, that, based on how people are bidding up stuff, and then based on that pattern. But I always wondered how much of the patterns are self-fulfilling prophecies where everyone sees the same head and shoulders and the same cup and handle. And it turns into like what we've talked about, where the patterns kind of take a life of their own. And so people don't like to think. And so then they see the pattern and they trade off of it. So if you get enough people on that, well, then that trade does become meaningful because enough people have a belief that a head and shoulders pattern is powerful or will lead to a certain type of action. And so it could do that. And it gets even more so potentially if you have algorithms that are basing it off the same rules.
Yeah, I agree. Plus, then will things stay static long enough for the pattern to actually form, or will people move before the pattern actually fully forms?
Right. And so it's one of the interesting things. So like if we're talking about, because like the stock market and stock charts are, I think, a perfect example of the difference between subjective and objective reality. And so like what the data is saying of what a value of a company is, that's what the data says. That may be very different than the ground truth. And we've had a really good lesson of that in 2008 with the financial crisis and the value of companies and the paper that they have. And so a lot of times the chart will give people confidence, right? They'll get more, the chart is going up. And so people are going to buy more, which is exactly like, there's no meaning to that. Like that's outside, like there, that could A, be random, B, you're paying more for something that it starts having a psychology effect on you. And, there's a whole element of economics, behavioral psychology, or behavioral economics that looks into like the madness of crowds and when they're bidding things up. You had the tulip craze back in like the 1600s, where people were spending like their life savings on tulips because that became a mania. I guess the housing is probably the best equivalent that we've had in 2008.
Real estate development in a foreign country.
Right. Yeah. And we had the tech crash. Pets.com is a favorite. Everybody likes pets.com. That was bid up for millions of dollars based on confidence and reinforcement from the charts, which is reinforcement from the data and reinforcement from the data visualization, where people were, becoming day traders. They were quitting work and they decided that they're just going to trade for looking at charts for their livelihood. So I think that's a really good example of how data visualization and data can impact people's confidence and decision making. Sorry, Michael, you guys say something?
No, I was just going to add in saying who's going to vote against an idea about pets, because who doesn't love pets, and what kind of a horrible person would you be if you thought pets were amazing? So
yeah, and looking at a chart, like, and you say that you have a process, alleviates you from actually doing any due diligence of that. Looking at the balance sheet, doing any type of financial analysis, like, hey, it's going up. Hey, if it's going up the last week, it's going to keep going up.
Fundamentals exist. There is something besides technical. What?
Yeah. Although, and there's going to be a quote later in this presentation where, there's also the opposite perspective on that too, because like if it's so overwhelming, you have everything that is based on technical analysis with, being reinforced by a lot of money from hedge funds and then also algorithms, then that in itself can be a truth.
You aren't saying Amazon 10 years ago, are you?
Well, I mean, like, yeah. So like there is a subjective reality that can will itself into to that reality, because like a company, if they sell a good story, I think Tesla is a good example of this. If they sell a good story where they have a lot of people that buy into it and bid up their shares high enough, they can actually benefit from that by being able to finance much cheaper compared to their competitors, and that becomes a competitive advantage.
I've never heard of GameStop or AMC.
Yeah, we won't get into that, but But yeah, so that's just, I think, a really good example of how data visualizations can really impact, and it becomes cultural. I mean, actually that AMC is a good example where there's actually people that, they have a lot of their livelihood based on what's happening on a chart. So yeah, then you get the other ones that are more typical that we've seen. You got line charts, area charts. We did baseline chart eventually. It was a struggle, but we got it. We got there. We talked about spark lines. We haven't done control charts, but it's essentially a line chart, except you just add some different rules to be able to see if it's out of control or not. It's kind of more of like a manufacturing and engineering type of way of looking at things. And then positive negative spark bars. Now that is actually a chart that I don't think has a universal like there's not, I don't think people have a name for it, but I've seen it around. I've used it myself. And I think it's actually a really good chart. And the best way I can describe it is a positive negative spark bar chart. And we will talk about that in a hands-on activity eventually. Magnitude, there's actually not too many for magnitude. And I know bar charts are boring, but a lot of times there's really nothing better than just a good bar chart. Parts to whole, which is always a hot button issue because then you're automatically talking about pie charts. And, that's a good way to ruffle the feathers of a Dataviz snob, is to talk about how much you like pie charts. There is always a time and place for pie charts and donut charts. Yes, they're not as visually accurate, but there's a lot of people who like them and they find them easy to understand. So I look at it as, sometimes it's more of an icon or just kind of a stylish way of having a big number, and not really care, not be too concerned about the negative aspects of the pie chart or donut chart. I will say though that if you have a lot of different items in a pie chart, then it becomes a less ideal choice. So Miller's law on steroids when it comes to pie charts. Me, it's two values is the best. 3 at most, but 2 is pretty much when you're only going to see me use it. Waterfall chart is actually pretty interesting, especially if you're doing any type of views where you're trying to show like revenue of like the unit price versus the unit cost of each different element. So like if I'm creating a data visualization about the revenue and cost of a McDonald's hamburger, there's going to be a segment of that price that's going to be towards labor. Part of it's going to be for the bun, a slice of cheese, that slice of beef, whatever the other toppings might be. So you got all those different cents. And then after all that, that's what the profit's going to be. So that's a really good use case of a waterfall chart to better understand kind of the cost of each unit. And unit chart. So a unit chart is interesting. Because it's actually its best use is, so I guess I should first step back and ask, does anybody know what a unit chart is? No. So unit chart is, I'll share an example. I actually got to scroll down to find a good example. So unit chart is like taking a discrete value and you're using like a symbol or a circle to show the count of something. And one of the ones I use unit charts for, especially for like survey responses or anything that has to do with counting people. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll have like a 0 to 100, like if you have a percent from 0 to 100, so percent of people. What that does is it makes it more meaningful. It makes it easier to understand for people to see like, oh, okay, 20 out of 100 people, they kind of think it's easier to get that idea, especially when they start to see like kind of visualize the number of people when it was associated with that. It may seem like a small change for a percentage, but I definitely do think it does add a little bit of meaning to the insight that you're providing when you either use a circle or an actual human like icon to be able to show like how distribution of opinion or other types of impact that involves people. It just allows people to connect with that a little bit more. And what chart is that on the right?
I want to say bump.
That is correct. Bump chart.
Woo woo!
That's right. So yeah, so this is ranking. And so ranking is what data type?
Ordinal.
Correct. Yep. And you also see well, you'll see here that we got ordered bar chart. So ordered bar chart, and this is just like something that I've talked about as a best practice. Like you should always order your bar charts. Because essentially what it's doing when you do that is not only are you getting the ratio data based on like the first, second, third, or I should say like the actual values of each of the different items, but that ranking is providing that additional information of the order. And you are making it easier for someone to actually not only see what the magnitude is, but also the order of things when you do that.
I kind of like the shape that it creates too, right? So is it close first through 10th, or is it more like a hyperbolic curve drop off, that kind of thing too?
Right. And so it's easier. So like when you're visually perceiving it, we're talking about a visual language, it's a lot easier to see that pattern when it's ordered compared to if you have this thing that's going like all over the place. That isn't being sorted. So you really have to have a good reason not to sort a bar chart. Like for whatever reason, people just would rather look at it, like the users would rather look at it alphabetically or something like that, which in almost every case, like I don't find that to be true. I may have it requested, but generally I think that people would find the bar charts easier to read and more meaningful when you have them ordered. And slope chart, you might think that that's a trend, but you can use slope chart for a correlation as well. Or I shouldn't say correlation, but as a relationship between two variables. And it really is just a really good way of showing ranking from a beginning time or to an ending time, or from one variable to another variable. So it's kind of like the ordered bar chart where you are kind of mixing and matching ratio and ordinal data. While bump chart is pure ordinal. You're removing all of that precision. Other considerations. So when I was talking about design choices, one of the really good examples of kind of how design choices impact visual communication is actually coming from topography. So when you're reading a book, you may not think about, and this is actually an idea I got from my UX design mentor, Cassandra Capello. She's excellent. She's actually now working at Microsoft. And she's an expert in topography. I can share the link to that class that she has if anyone's interested. But she had an example in her class about when you're reading a book, you don't really notice the topography of it. But if it's bad topography, it will impact how you're understanding the information. And so it seems like a very like basic decision on like how you're typesetting, like what your font size is, what your typeface is. So if I go wingdings, that's probably not the best way to communicate very dense scientific literature. And so if I like go 2 point, if I have like a font size at 2 points, then that's gonna be like way too small. Or if I just go like gigantic, then you're gonna have like 1 billion pages, and that's not a good experience either. And small decisions, like if you have too many words on the line, you know, you're supposed to have like 60 words. I think it's like 60 to 80 words per line. That's like optimal for someone to read before they start losing track and they want to like go to a new line. If that's not done well, then all that different poor design decisions will impact your reading experience. And if you have a poor reading experience, that will lead to frustration. And if you're frustrated, you're probably not going to be learning the material that was intended based on what you were writing. So there are a lot of parallels to that idea with visual data visualization and visual communication, where the design decisions will impact how people are reading your information, not only from an accuracy perspective, but also if they're going to be receptive to new ideas on how you're presenting it. Color is a huge deal. We talked about color. And you always want to be strategic with color and purposeful with color. Always have a good reason what you're using it, because you only have limited amount of, you want to think about your user as having limited attention span, and every color that you add is going to distract them. And so you really want to make sure that it's leading them in the right direction. Layouts are going to be dependent on what type of tool you're using. If it's a dashboard, it's going to be very different than a mobile. It's going to be very different than if I'm like using D3, where I can use something what is known as scrolly telling. Scrolly telling is basically like a web pattern where I have the scroll on my mouse that is going to take me to each of the different insights. An example to find scrolly telling visualizations and kind of like what you could do. I recommend pudding.cool. I just put a link in Slack. And then also like infographics, things that are more static, you're going to have a lot more freedom on how you're going to be able to lay out your data visualization. So the less interactivity you have, the more freedom that you have in putting visual design into your into what you're trying to share. And also you can have denser information, have more text involved. And for that, for those types of infographic views, I recommend Visual Capitalist to get examples of that, just to compare and contrast with Tableau and the types of data visualizations we are creating. This is kind of a nifty chart I just saw that they had. It's a grid map or a tile map that acts as like a heat map, but they also use images. So this is something that's going to be like, or you're going to have a little bit more freedom on how you're designing it based on it being static.
Which one are you looking at?
I'm put it in Slack, the top selling vehicles in America. That's from Visual Capitalist. And we already talked a little bit about navigation interactivity. So navigation, how many dashboards should you have is going to impact how much interactivity. So the fewer dashboards you have, the fewer like other dashboards that you're going to be selecting and moving to is going to impact how much interactivity or how much information that's going to be presented in one screen. And so oftentimes it's best to kind of spread that out to have a balance, because again, it kind of goes back into like with all the other design choices is you want to have a balance. You want to be able to balance like the number of dashboards that you have with the amount of complexity and interactivity that's available to users. Because the more that you add, then the tougher it is for them to learn. And I'm ending with one of my favorite quotes by Machiavelli. How we live is so different from how we ought to live that he who studies what ought to be done rather than what is done will learn the way to his downfall rather than to his preservation. And so we're talking about design decisions and all the other decisions associated with data visualization. It's one thing to be able to go around and saying that I got the best practices and I'm just doing this. Just making charts out of the data, but there's a lot more to it than that. As we've talked about, it's very complex. It depends on who your audience is. It depends on what your data is. It depends on what the goals of the company is and the goals of the users that you're working with, who are going to have, different expectations compared to what the standard best practice of data visualization is going to say. And then we also talked about how ethics and change management are going to be foundational with all data visualizations that you share, because it's how people are understanding the truth around them. Like I talked about, that most people are going to look at charts and assume that it's ground truth, when often the case it's not how it is. However, that doesn't absolve you from that responsibility. And you have to understand that people are going to have high confidence in everything that you're sharing. So it actually adds more responsibility for those who are designing data visualizations, because you're essentially creating truth for other people. And it is something that is a very fulfilling and satisfying type of work, but it's also ones that can have large consequences and ramifications if it's taken, the responsibilities of the job is taken too lightly. An example is, the Challenger rocket explosion that happened in the 80s, I believe it was the 80s, where they went through a check and they had data that showed that it wasn't safe to fly, based on political reasons, that they needed to launch the rocket based on an arbitrary schedule. They went ahead with it despite the reservations or despite the issues in the data about it not being safe. And, that led to one of the bigger tragedies in American history. So, it's one of those things that it really depends on like what type of work you're doing. Maybe errors won't matter, but sometimes it could matter a great deal. So it's always good to have that perspective, to trust but verify, and to actually go out and see exactly how the data is being collected and what each of the metrics actually mean, instead of just assuming, because it could be very different than what you're seeing. Are there any questions? All right. Well, is everyone okay to having an early break this time so we get into some workshop or more hands-on activities now? Okay. 8:01. Yeah, the gang's all here. All right. We're going to call this heat map. New worksheet. Both playing at home.
You did a worksheet, not a dashboard, correct?
I'm going to take subcategory. I'm going to put it on rows. I'm going to take order date. And we are going to switch it to, oh, that's great. Let me get my data working here.
Yeah, my Tableau was having some issues at the beginning. Very slow.
I can share until we're all in a good spot.
Okay. So we got month, order date. It says it's discrete. It's going to be on columns, and then subcategory on rows. A lot of blue pills. Going to take sales, and we're going to place it on color. That one's easy, huh? And if you want to, you can take sales and put it on label, and then just make sure that you still got square. So now you got labels if that is something that you think is important. But I'm going to keep this off for now. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate.
Okay, yeah, there.
I'm going to call this X bar.
What are you duplicating? The
And I'm going to get rid of subcategory and move sales. to rows. And we'll pull down menu on the mark section and changed it to bars. So you're essentially creating a bar chart off of that same value of month and sum of sales.
Okay. Slow.
And then we're going to duplicate heat map again. This time we're going to call it Y bar. And we're just going to do the same thing, except for subcategory. Next, we're going to create a dashboard.
Okay, that last one, because I didn't
And
look
we're
back
just
fast
going
enough,
to,
was sum of sales and subcategory.
I should probably label this X bar and not Y bar, but that's all right. We know what we're talking about. We get it.
Can anybody hear me?
And then you put the X bar. And so then you treat it kind of like Legos here.
Yes, Ronnie.
And you're just trying to get this to fit
Okay.
where the bars. And if you need to, you can fit entire view. So I'm going to go to dashboard and then size. I'm just going to give myself a little bit more size. You may not have this luxury. So, and then for each of these charts, you can go from standard to entire view on the top pull down menu. So you just left click.
Okay, I'm
And
not
move that to
going as
entire
fast
view.
as you're going there, David.
I can get rid of the title here and get rid of the field labels. Let's get rid of the title up here. And I'm going to take a blank. And put it here so that this will fit in a little better.
Hey, David, where'd you get the blank
Take
from?
another blank.
Oh, see, I see it now.
David, I can't hear you talking, but I can see your mouth moving.
Yeah, I haven't heard you speak for a while either, David.
Okay.
But David,
Oh, David.
Slow down, David.
Do you think he can? David, okay, do you think he can't hear us?
I don't know. I wonder too.
Oh no, sorry.
I don't know if you could hear us, but we just now heard you after I don't know how long.
When we got back,
I didn't hear anybody.
we couldn't hear you either.
That's great teamwork, though. I gotta say.
Oh my
I'm like lost.
You all look like
Master
you're part of like on a
Dashboard
rocket ship, and you're trying to like, oh no,
Oh my God.
it's about we're about ready to go into the stratosphere.
I'm like, how does he
And
not
that's
know
not
we
cool.
don't have any questions for this long?
I know. Like, can we go back to starting this
All right.
dashboard, David? That's really
Yeah, so my AirPods were not connected to the computer.
Okay.
Oh my.
So funny.
You were all feeling the same thing I was feeling, I hope.
No, still can't hear you. 1 second.
Okay. That was good.
Because I've created dashboards before, but not as fast as I can't remember size them as fast as he is. So especially
Yeah,
with a touchpad.
it's not letting me.
Did he name the dashboard, you guys? Or because he did create a dashboard, right? And then he was gonna add the
I didn't realize David exited. So he created a dashboard, and I think I was kind of following along up until he put a blank on the bottom, and then I lost after that.
Let's see if this works.
I
But
don't
did he
think
name the
there's
dashboard? That's what I was curious.
No, I don't have a name yet.
no.
Mine's dashboard 8.
And just remind me how we pulled those other 3
No.
pages in. You just grab the tab. That's right.
So to the left where it says sheets, you just drag them and drop.
Yeah, I just went from the left in the middle where it had the names you just created. And you see on he's got the blue icon in the lower right of each one of those icons next to heat map, Y bar, and X bar.
I think I got to get to the database, though. I think I created another sheet, so that's why I didn't see it. I was okay on sheets.
Y'all can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have the heart to mess with you at this point.
So which sheet is the order date? What's the first sheet that he pulled over?
I think heat map was the first one that I pulled over.
Yeah, heat
but
map.
I could be wrong.
And then it was
X.
Heat map, then
All right.
X.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Cool.
All right. I don't know why that was an issue, but it was an issue.
But size thing, David, that's where I stuck.
Oh, were you stuck?
I have all the graphs, but resizing them. Yeah, I don't know why.
Would it make sense for each one of us to share what we have, and then by the time we get to our
that'd be
final
fine.
third, then we'd know?
Yeah, that's fine.
Who wants to go first?
I was kind of thinking, like, I assume things a lot, and I was like, wow, everyone's really quiet. This really picked this up.
They're jamming. Look at them go.
I would say, can anybody hear me?
I know someone would ask a question and just be silent. And then I was like, I don't think. And then we couldn't hear you. And I'm like, okay, he's not ignoring us.
Yeah, that's.
I can't share.
I was not ignoring you.
Okay.
Well, at least we're having fun.
Okay. I'll share first.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So, which one am I on? Okay. So this is where I lost you.
Okay. So, right click on the subcategory on the bar chart, and then you can remove header.
Which bar chart? Each of them?
The one that his arrow's on, the one on the right. You want to get rid of the you want to get rid of both of them. It doesn't. I don't have mine that way yet, but.
Okay. Is it just hide title is what you're doing?
It should be header.
What?
So just right click like right on it, and there should be a show header. that you can unclick. You might need to save, Michael, and close and reopen.
Okay.
Mine's just edit title, hide title, format title. I don't have header.
Yeah, let me. So if you right click here,
On the bottom, and that's which bar is that? The Rex bar, or that's the order date, right?
yeah, that's the month. So you'll see this check mark right here. It says show header. And if I unclick it, then it will go away.
How do I have the three or side by side, and I can't get them to like bring the bottom up so it's, so I just have the bar graph. I can't move them around. That's what I don't.
So
Shape the size of the graph.
these are all tiled. And so then if you just hover over like the in between here, you'll see your icon change to where it has up and down.
I got to switch it to entire view, though. That's probably what's causing me the issues, right?
Yep. Yeah. So if you left click on your chart, then you can change it to different views.
Mine's so close to the edge, I can't grip it with this.
Yeah, it can be a hassle sometimes.
So is there any other way to grab something somewhere if it's going top to bottom and left to right? I mean, there's no like corner or sizing. I can't.
No, I don't think there's corner sizing. No, you have to go left to right, and then.
I'm just going to take mine off again and then see what I can do.
So I got a blank up here and a blank down here, just so that it helps me line up the bar chart with the heat map.
Okay, but every one of the charts should be entire view?
Yes, every single one.
Ah.
Are you still getting errors, Michael?
No, I think I'm almost where I need to be.
Okay.
What I don't have. Oh, and maybe you don't have it anymore either. At one point, you had.
No, I'm sharing your screen.
Oh, okay. I'll say because at one point, I had you were putting a blank down here. Excuse me, down here, and I didn't get that one.
Okay.
And I have these scroll bars.
Yeah, and so that's when you want to entire view. So left click that, and then in the pull down menu at the top, it has standard. At the very top of the menu. Very, very top.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, no worries. Entire view.
Okay, and then do that for all of them?
Yes. And that just makes it easier for you to move the different things around. So then
the floating instead of tile, is that?
You can, yeah. I did tile.
I just cannot grab it, and it's frustrating.
Yeah. Try floating instead. That could be easy.
Still nothing.
So the blank in there means that there's no data, so that's fine. That's just a null value. So you want to remove the header from the top bar chart?
From here?
Yep.
You even want order date gone?
The months.
Oh,
you want to keep that just like that. Because it's redundant since you have January, February below there. And then also a blank below the heat map. matches with the axis on the bar chart on the right. And then you want to, yeah, and I'd probably make your heat map a little bigger.
Like to
make your, yep.
Where do you left click to get the months gone?
To get the months gone, you just left click right directly on it, the one that you want to remove. Or right click, sorry.
Exclude?
Right click. Should be show header. Show header should be check marked, and you want to uncheck mark it.
Okay, I see.
Something in mine does not allow me to move them, like they're just on top of each other. They're not like adjusting to location when you move them around.
Sounds frustrating.
I am real frustrated right now.
So
'Cause
David,
it's
if you,
simple.
I'm sorry, Rennie. David, if you think this is a good like waypoint, I can unshare or stop sharing if anyone else wants to share.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I'd probably make your heat map a little bit bigger and your bar chart a little bit smaller on the top one.
Okay, so pull this up higher.
Yeah.
Like, yay.
Yeah, I think that's good.
And then do this to match. Oops.
Yep.
Cool. Okay.
And then the other thing that I did was I increased the size of the bars. And then I put on a white border. So I can share my screen.
Okay.
So you can see.
Oh, okay.
So how you do that is you go to the underlying one, and then I put size all the way. And you're going to see that if I don't have a border, it's just going to be like that. But then you can.
I just can't get my mouse to turn to a, it just selects the whole thing, or it.
So are you having problems of adjusting the size of the charts?
Yeah. I just can't get, like, I'm not grabbing, I'm trying to go right up. But it doesn't turn into that, the mouse doesn't change into anything but the pointer for me to grab something and size it. That's where I'm.
Yeah, I mean, like.
So how did you just make that smaller like that with the drop down? Where did you go?
So I just did. So it's right now as a tile, and I just went down here to floating. So it's now floating, and so then you should be able to have more freedom on how you're resizing it.
Okay. But we want to get rid of still the header when it's got the X bar. I got hide tile or
Show header.
show header. So you got to be down at the bottom. Okay, but the name of the actual sheet, like the X bar or the Y bar or the heat map, how'd you get rid of that?
Right click and show title.
Right, so I do have to hide the title.
Yeah, hide title. Yep.
And how'd you get them to all squish together? Size?
Yeah, you just go to size and you just push it all the way.
Okay.
And then go to color and go to border and then go to white.
Border white.
And one last thing you can do is you can add sum of sales to color, and it's going to default to the blue, even though the heat map defaulted to blue teal. So you switch. So you right click on the color legend, go to edit colors, and then you can change the palette to blue teal, which will match the heat map.
All right, you were dragging them on the dashboard, and they were actually clicking into the space that you were dragging them to.
Yeah, it was just left click drag. I didn't do anything.
Left click, drag. Mine, and you left click to where? All
So like if you left click on the chart, you'll see this little notch up here.
this way.
And
Is it your screen we're looking at? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that little notch right here, and then I can move it.
All right. So subcam.
Hey, David, do you want to run me through the color change again? I missed that part.
Sure. So if you go to the underlying worksheet,
Okay, so I'm going to go to XBAR.
drag sales on the color. You don't want to remove your bar chart. So if you're doing that, control or command, left click drag two colors.
Okay.
And put it on color.
Sorry.
Right click on the color legend.
Okay. Edit colors.
Yep. And then change that to teal instead of blue. Blue teal.
Blue teal.
Is there
Okay,
a
cool.
sales
Thank
one
you.
somewhere just floating around?
Is there a what?
I have a sales one just floating around. Can you go back to
It should be heat map, Y bar, and X bar. So
the sales
So-
go with the order date?
sales goes with the order date. Yeah,
Okay.
so this is sales by order date, and this bar chart down here is sales by subcategory.
Right, but can you see my little sales thing dancing around here?
Okay, so you don't need the legend, so you can X out of the legend. That's causing issues.
Where's the legend? How do I get out of the legend?
It's that little color scale below your horizontal
here?
bar chart. I think so.
So what do I do? Title, take it off?
Yeah, you can just X out of it.
Oh, X out of it right there. Okay. So I think I got them in the right place. If I see your original, I just got to size them up. How'd you get the blank ones? Where'd you get the blank?
Oh, the blanks are from the objects down in the bottom left. Yep.
I drug one over, but how do I make it? I need a tutorial on sizing these.
Yeah, Tableau formatting is not the easiest.
Yeah, because I drug it over, and why wouldn't it snap into like where I'm thinking of picture in front, picture in back, picture transparent, locking into the grid. There's nothing like that.
No.
So when I drag a blank one and it's too big, then I need to go where?
If it's too big, you just resize it like the other ones. So
I
you
know,
should
but
just
I'm
be
not good at resizing because I can't get to the cursor. So what's the fastest way? Because I got a blank one over the whole.
Are you using a mouse or a trackpad?
No, I'm using a damn trackpad. Right now.
Okay, because I was gonna say my mouse.
So that's the problem. Let me see if I
Yeah.
I don't have this dang mouse connected. That's the problem. I'll see if I can do a Bluetooth.
Probably.
No
yeah.
wonder I'm frustrated. All right, keep going.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So for the X bar, did you do the order date or sales to color?
Sales.
Okay. And same with, and then the Y bar, you did subcategory?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Wait, you didn't use sales for the color on both?
I did.
Okay.
Oh, you did use sales for both.
Oh, sorry. I misunderstood your second question. Yes, I use sales for both. Thank you, Michael, for pointing that out.
Okay. No. Buddy. Sorry.
No worries. I heard what I hope was Midas scratching upstairs.
So one other thing we could do is we can sort subcategories based on sales. We're gonna keep dates the way they are because that's meaningful, because there's a logical reason for that. But there's no, like, outside of alphabetical, that's not really a strong reason to keep that sort order by default. So we need to sort this for both the heat map and the bar chart. So that's easy. You just go into the underlying worksheet, hover over sales, and there should be the icon that you just left click there. Going into the heat map. This one, you don't have an axis, so you have to right click on subcategory, left click sort, go descending, field, sales, sum. And that should line up with your bar chart.
So descending on the fields from the data source order dropdown.
Yes. So you right click, go to sort, and sort by field, descending order, field name is sales, aggregation sum.
Cool.
Maura, you seem unsure.
Don't you know a mouse helps things here?
Yes.
Hey,
mouse
Maura,
also helps.
you're on mute, so we can't tell what you're saying.
Oh, you guys can't read lips.
Well, we did, but it's in binary. It was speaking, not speaking.
You guys didn't understand any of these. Okay. I don't know whose screen is on. I think it's David's.
It's
I
my
think
screen.
David's. Yeah. So, David, I have kind of a crazy question left field, probably more so for UX. Because you talk about visualizations, just like statistics can lie, and even not meaningfully or intentionally. So that makes me think about testing. How would you test your UI to know that it's like, in this case, what if we forgot to sort something, right? The colors wouldn't actually, the saturation of the colors wouldn't actually match up to some of the corresponding tiles. Is there any sort of like test way, or is it just more like just being diligent in your work? I mean, I'm asking a crazy question.
Well, I mean, there's probably different ways you can approach it. One is what they call like a hallway test, which is if you have another Dataviz person, you can have them just check it when they haven't gone through the process. And that's usually like earlier in the process of like before you actually show it to users. You can also do a usability test where we could be on something similar to this, where I'd be like on a Zoom call and I have a new dashboard and this first time you see it, and I just ask you questions like, all right, just tell me everything about your first impressions. What does this mean to you? Just speak, verbalize all the thoughts that are going through your head. And then you can capture that, because what you'd be doing then is recording it. So then I would be able to go back and then see all the different comments being made about the dashboard that I wouldn't be able to get without capturing that through a usability test. And from there, I can get a transcription of it, and I can also see patterns from that, from multiple usability tests. So typically it takes 5 usability tests to see all the different issues that you might have with the dashboard you have for users. If you're talking about quality control, then yes, I guess you could say it's diligent with your work. but it's always good to organize things well, in that a dashboard has a user goal in mind. And then you can document what that user goal is. And based on that, you can have it fairly similar to like a dev test of unit testing, making sure that it's doing what you think it should be doing.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you go back to your dashboard?
Well, that's an easy question. Yes. Yes, I can.
Thanks.
That I do have that ability. Do you want? I'm kidding.
May you please go back?
I'm kidding. No, I'm not going to be a jerk.
I know what you were getting at. Okay. Okay. I think mine looks just like yours.
Perfect.
Except for
Oh,
I have dollars, and you probably should have dollars because that makes sense.
I see. So this is not a question. It's making a point.
As one Dataviz to another, I'm just testing your dashboard.
There you go. Finding ways to improve it.
I'm just annotating my stream of conscious.
That's right. I've created monsters.
Yeah, you.
You said the best practice was da 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 da.
Mhm. But I think I did it.
Yeah, high five.
I keep forgetting my camera's on this one
Oh yeah,
side.
yeah. That's always a challenge.
I don't have a very functioning dual screen setup right now, but it works.
How did you get that to dollars there then? Formatting on the sales? That's the only thing I think I'm missing.
Well, Maura, why don't you show the class how you did that?
Funny you bring that up. I think I set sales as automatic in like class 2 so that I wouldn't have to go back. I like efficiencies, and that was one. But
So
I think you
changed the
click on,
default.
yeah. But let me think about it.
All right.
Okay, but I am sorting on field. I forgot to sort the other ones some, so now that's accurate. But I got to take the header off.
Yeah. You should only have to sort the subcategory. We're not
Format.
sorting.
You go to format, Ronnie.
Yep.
You
Okay, format on
Format axis.
Yep.
Cool.
And then axis, and then numbers, and I think that's where I don't want to click things and have it go away.
format.
Oh,
axis.
mine is automatic going to dollars.
So format, table books, axis, numbers. There you go. Currency. Standard or
I think custom.
oh yeah, that's what David likes. Custom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's got to
Know
be
your
full,
audience.
isn't it?
Know
Right.
your audience. Good deal. But I don't want 2 decimal places either.
Nope, you just click them back. I would explain further, but I'm afraid to click things because it's already right.
Now.
That's what you have back button for.
Oh,
You
right.
should never have fear.
I love Control Z.
So Ronnie, how you doing?
Good, other than on the sales. David, you have sales down there in the lower right-hand corner on that bar chart.
Yes.
How come mine is mine hidden?
You must have overdid it on the hiding of the headers.
Yeah.
He did or I did. Hiding on the headers, yeah. Let's see. It's not under format. Where would I click on that? Because there's no, just anywhere.
So if you go to the underlying worksheet, you go to the green pill for some of the sales for that bar chart. You right click it, and you can go to show header and return it.
And this is.
And Ronnie, you're down with the underlying chart part, right?
I think, do I just go to the sheet down in the bottom?
Yep, just the underlying worksheet. Yep.
Okay, and then you went to the
Sum of sales, because
Sum
that's
of
the scale
sales.
for it. Yep.
Right. And show header.
Yep. So you're reversing the hide header. You're actually showing it now.
Okay, and then I just have to format it to dollars as well, currency.
Well, originally that wasn't a requirement for this project, but
Somebody up the game.
so I would
And
say
then on peer review,
it wasn't my requirement.
we all kind of went, ooh.
Some of this students have a higher standard.
Now, the only thing that doesn't look like yours is I have subcategory and order date still showing above.
So
the-
you just hid the wrong headers.
Or you just hide those headers.
Yep.
You don't hide the ones that are showing on my screen.
Back on the original hide tile. No.
I also have another difference.
Here we go.
But this one is it's just for looks. It doesn't
Hiding the grid lines?
no. I have it in K's. Is that how you say that?
Yeah, I think that's
The sales.
appropriate.
Yeah.
In thousands.
In thousands, yeah. That's also probably a better way of saying that.
I think we know.
I have them in K's.
Okay, I'm not finding the hide tiles on those individual ones. Do I have or hide the subcategory and the order dates?
Yeah. So if you go to the underlying worksheet, you can just go to the month. And so here I'm showing it, but then you can just right click and just hide it.
So what I think is very interesting about this visualization is November, December, phones and chairs are being sold. Like, is that like, trying to think about a funny way to say this, but it's kind of like all of a sudden the budget's like, hey, let's make everybody happy. What do they want? They want phones and chairs.
I would be happy with the new chair.
Right, exactly. I mean, that was a thing that just forever has been like, can I get a different chair? So,
Yeah. Good chair is important,
mm-hmm.
especially when you're working from home.
True.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's so like this gives a little bit more information than just a typical heat map. So you get the benefit of the heat map where you can scan it, but then the bar chart allows you to see that more in depthly.
Yeah, it's almost like it leads your eye to it.
Yeah, and this is like so. It's I really like combining charts that are giving more context and additional information instead of like having. You'll see a lot of times where some people are trying to put as many charts, different chart types, on a single view.
You mean chart bingo?
I guess so. I did not know that was the term.
Or visual bingo? Anyway, sorry.
But they're just like, and so there's another example I like to show like how you can build where it's like use spark lines but like it can show you the magnitude, the trend, and kind of the range, and all the different information on each of the different items. So that's really easy to be able to see like all the different ways that you can look at it. So that gives you that context that a single chart won't be able to give you. Like the worst request is I want to see all my data in one view. It's like, no, you don't. You may think you do, but you don't. You really don't.
And then I'll decide later. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree that this is there's more than the sum of parts here by having these together.
Yep. And another thing you can do that Maura hasn't gotten to yet. Maybe she has, but hasn't mentioned it yet. You can go to dashboard and go to actions, and you can add an action and go to highlight, and then go to selected field, and then make sure that you check the month and subcategory.
Wait, don't exit out yet.
Not,
Yeah, so
Don't go yet.
Whoa. Yeah, so okay, so I finally found dashboards. I went to actions, and then what was the next thing I was supposed to do?
add action.
Okay, and that's a drop down, and then I would select
Highlight.
highlight. Okay, cool. All right.
So it says add highlight action, and then it should be select run action on heat map, X bar, Y bar.
Okay. I'm
Okay,
there.
then you have selected fields. Okay.
Yeah, all fields should work too.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just a force of habit. One of my,
Okay.
I won't say it's a bad habit. It's just a habit.
And then select. Okay, cool. And then
And how did
Cool.
you get to that menu?
Go to dashboard. So I'll go back here again.
off the file menu, dashboard.
Yep.
Oh, got it.
Actions,
Actions.
add action, and then highlight in the pop-up.
And then you're going dashboard to.
Yep.
Yep.
So this is basically saying this is the source of when you click on, and then so this is where the action is initiated, and this is where the action is targeted. And so we're just saying we want everything connected, and all fields, or if you do selected fields, you want to have everything selected. So you hit OK, hit OK. Now, when you click.
Man, I am sure glad Maura figured out that mouse that I needed to add.
Yeah,
I would still be frustrated.
I should have a new class for Tableau Trackpad 101.
Yeah. No
Although-
kidding.
My problem solving abilities. But my computer did not like that action item.
Oh no.
Oh, that also could be why.
So I missed, and I think Michael, you asked about it. The sales
Go ahead.
value column. You changed it from blue to white.
So I did change it from blue, but I've changed it to blue teal. And David, I may not have remembered this correctly, so I will talk through it, but feel free to jump in. So I went back to the underlying chart, so like Y bar, X bar, and then I would click on, I think I did a right click on one of the bars.
Color legend.
Yes, thank you.
Over up at the
By left clicking, the color legend pops up over on the right hand side, and then right click somewhere in that gradient. Does that make sense so far, Ronnie?
Yeah, I just gonna make sure I see where that color bar is over on the right side.
It says, like, it has your green pill in your columns. It says sum of sales. So then the legend on the right hand side will have the same thing. And then just in that gradient, do a right click.
Can you go though to your the X bar?
Sure, we can do X bar too.
If I don't have the X bar set up exactly, so I still
It's the
need
same-
that sum of sales. I didn't have the sum of sales on
Okay.
that one. That's why I didn't. So I need sum of sales on the color bar there.
Right. Yep.
Because I didn't. So. Sales. Okay.
Okay, I'm back in action. My tablet just quit out on me.
Oh no.
But I'm here. I'm just not going to put that action back.
So did you say go to format legends then? Is that what you did, or edit?
You know, and if I did, sorry, that's not what I was intended to say.
Edit colors.
So, yeah, so if you already have the legend in the upper right.
Okay, just edit colors.
Yep.
And go to blue teal instead of blue.
Under the automatic.
Yeah, so there's automatic. Go to blue teal.
Okay. Blue teal. And okay or apply.
Yep.
All right, so when I go back to my dashboard, you see what is right over here?
No.
You're kind of washed out.
There. Okay.
You see where it's
let
got
me
the
see if-
sale right here? Ah, I'm trying to change to white to match your guys'.
So what's the question?
Can I try a stab at this, David?
Right.
Hey, Ronnie, are you asking about the white in between each of the bars?
No, I'm asking right here about this in the sales, the labels for, you know.
Oh,
on
the
that-
axis.
that-
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
the
We didn't change the
accent.
color of that. So right click on that.
You did change the color to that? Yeah.
We did not.
Oh,
We did not.
So, Ronnie, mine looked that way when I had it selected, and I just
Oh.
had to click somewhere outside of it.
Oh,
and
that's what it is. Oh, okay. Yeah. So you just highlighted it. Yeah. Yeah.
So just click outside of there, and it should be back to normal.
yep.
Okay.
Again, I was making it, trying to make it look just like your guys's, and that's what my question was. Sorry.
Well, that's all we're going to do for today. So if you want, you can head out early. But I will be here after class as well, in case anybody wants to take advantage of office hours. Otherwise, have a good evening and see you on Thursday.
Sounds good. Yep, you too. See everyone later.
See ya.
All right.
And-
Good job, everyone.
I just have a question.
Good team effort.
Yeah, team effort. I do want to narrow the white space between my bars.
Yeah.
Is that just on size in the actual, on the actual sheet?
Yeah. So the worksheets, you just go to size and you just go to the largest.
Increase it a little. Yeah, there we go.
All the way. I went all the way. And then you just go to color and go to border. And you can
Okay.
add white border.
Color and border and white. Got it. And I do that on the Y bar as well then.
Right.
Size increase. Oh, that was way, and then color and border. Got it. And then I think I'm good. I should look just like yours. And the only other question I have is I may be traveling or out of range on Thursday night. I don't know yet, depending on weather and what have you. Am I able to at least
Get a
watch
recording?
and listen on my iPad if I'm available?
Yeah.
Or at least you'd be recording it and I could watch
Yeah,
it.
I record it. Yeah,
Okay.
and it goes to a private YouTube channel that you'll have access to at the very least. Yeah.
My intent is wherever I'm at, I'm going to try to connect and minimally listen and watch to the extent that I can. I can usually multitask with some AirPods in, but I might not be as interactive as I'd like to be. I don't know for sure the schedule yet, what my
Sure.
commitments are on Thursday evening, but I just want to give you a heads up that I would be possibly
Sure.
not able to attend.
What
in
I
my
would do
home
is
study.
watch the video and see if you could recreate everything just like normal. And if you have
Uh-huh.
any issues, and I would encourage you to try and like learn, like try to figure it out, like rewind and
Yep.
see how much you can do. But
Yep.
if you do get stuck, then I always have office hours after class,
Right.
and would be able to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I had, but I think I got everything looking just like I'm going to just save this as class 5 then, just to make sure everything's saved just in case.
Yep. Yeah, and hopefully your trial stuff still is.
Yeah, and I think, and the principal even had me ask in the district meeting on Friday, because I got the email that it was going to expire or whatever, and so I printed the pricing, but I saw where the academic pricing as well as the to teach the kids it in our technology course sequence, and we're looking at building this data pathway, and so it was perfect timing. But I got from the district people, we're not quite there yet. They're worried about even the request for teaching kids cybersecurity and what they can and can't do. And so I thought, all right, I ain't getting it overnight, but minimally, I said, let me at least call them and say, can you extend, my trial, and I'll work through the problem. But that very same, when I was working it out and meeting with the guy before we were going to go meet with the pathway people from the district, then my freshman academy guy said, hey, the teachers are requesting Tableau on their, so they can analyze the kids' data and keep the kids on track and what have you. And I'm thinking,
Sure.
well, they've just given us the Tableau, would it be called, just the viewer, for deans and assistant principals. I mean, we just have the viewer, which is I think $15 or $20 a user in a district like ours or whatever. I'm like, geez, they're not going to give that to the teachers, but the teachers are the ones that need to know the data and view it in order to, make the impact with the kids and So I think we're going to get somewhere, but it would just, everything was culminating. I said, things are happening for a reason, because I got this meeting coming up. The teachers are requesting it. My principal's behind it. It's just a matter of, those technical folks at the district trusting us to play around a little bit and not cause them more work. So
that's the last thing they want.
Yeah, right, exactly. But at the same time, we could be their little incubator, entrepreneur. We're kind of, owning our data and figuring it out and having the end user, it could impact change, I think, faster, hopefully. But we'll see. Slow and steady wins the race, right?
Yep. You don't want to kick a hornet's nest too early in the process.
Right, but I feel like this is going on 2 years now. I mean,
Oh, sure.
Not that the pandemic and other things haven't impacted the technology needs of a district like ours, but
well, it's probably even more important now to track people's students' performance, especially during the pandemic, because that also could be an early indication of something else that's happening too, and it could be early intervention.
Right, exactly. So, all right, well, I will let you go, and I'll be in touch, even responding via email or whatever I have to do. Thursday night when I know more of what the schedule's going to be like.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thanks, Ronnie.
You bet. Thank you.
Yep, reach out if you have any questions. So,
Will do. Thanks.
All right, no worries. Have a good evening.